although oddly not Ottoman, Mongol, Arab Muslim, or Moorish colonialism, is today almost invariably described as an unmitigated evil. Meanwhile, the facts are more complicated. There is little, if any, evidence that states that were never colonized, think Liberia, Ethiopia, and Thailand, are on average better off today than those that were. India, Nigeria, Indonesia, Kenya, etc. I am clearly not arguing that these bloody wars of conquest were free of hypocrisy and what we would today consider injustice. But this brings us to a key point, which serves as something of a central theme for this book. Modern American morality is an aberration. If you don't understand that, then history will be nothing but one long shock to our naive systems. The past is a foreign country, as the saying goes, with its own laws and customs. We'd be wise to familiarize ourselves with those rules before we go adventuring. The reality is that international law, defending things like human rights and individual liberty, and opposing wars of aggression, is a distinctly modern concept. The right to conquest was only banned by an international body after World War II. And if we're honest, neutral international bodies often spend most of their time obscuring how seldom non-Western countries actually follow said international law today. In addition to applying our standards to the past, leftist teachers often try to argue that messy reality should have rather been more like impossibly pure alternative. But history isn't a choice between a bad present and a perfect hypothetical. All actions must be compared to their real-world alternatives, and not to what might occur in utopia. This isn't convenient for a leftist view of history. In their minds, all non-white peoples lived as noble savages in enlightened gardens of Eden before being corrupted by contact with grubby foreign invaders. In reality, almost all areas of the world that were conquered by the West were previously under the thumb, or the boot heel, of brutal and unelected native rulers, often external conquerors themselves. The previous ruling power across most of British India was the Turco-Mongol-Mogul Empire, which imposed the state religion of Sunni Islam on the Indian subcontinent, if lightly, and taxed peasants at roughly half the value of their annual crop. The choice for most Nigerians was between the red-coated rule of the Britishers and the black Muslim Sokoto Caliphate, then the second largest slave power in the world. There is, of course, a caveat here, something to add on to any truly accurate discussion of the American and human past. The fact that everybody did X virtually throughout history, that the great native nations were easily as brutal to captives and women as their white opponents. Slavery was a global practice since before Sargon of Akkad. Whipping at the post was legal in the United States, for whites as well as beautiful POC, until 1972, etc., does not mean that the things everyone did were good, or even okay. For most ordinary people living through history, war for conquest was normal, but brutal, whichever end of the gun you happened to be on. What most people cared about was what society looked like when the gun smoke cleared. For such people, Western societies were often the best bad option. That doesn't mean that Western conquerors were always right to conquer, or that they weren't often hypocrites, even by their own loose standards. However, although normal isn't the same as good when it comes to history or any other topic, it's important to be aware of norms because they determine the scale and tenor of our judgment of the past. Per the moral standards, virtually all of us profess to believe in today, enslaving your enemies is bad, even though it happened under colonizers in every shade of the human rainbow. Although, to be fair, the Chinese Uyghur Muslims who made your smartphone might silently chuckle to hear that said. Breaking treaties that were based upon your sworn word to pick just one sin common across the races and ages is bad. But